up, everyone? Eric Rossi, the guy with the eye here. Just finished watching the Sony press release and the announcement of the Sony A9, which you see on screen right here. I just got some quick reference stuff. We'll just talk about some things and see who this is for and that I'm never going to buy. But essentially, the Sony A9 is a new full-frame camera. On April 19th, 2017, it was announced. It's going to be available in May. It's also going to be $4,500 in the US, and I think they said $5,500, $6,500. I think $5,500 in Canada. So if you're in Canada, you kind of get shafted a little bit. It looks like it's going to be $5,600, and pre-orders actually start in 2 days. So this Friday on the 21st. Now, they said they've been developing this for a while. I think the guy, Michael Fasulo, I'm not 100% sure his name, had said that Sony was working on two of their main commitments: innovation and proof that they're listening to their customers. And that's been a huge thing. A lot of their big problems is they literally weren't responding to their customers' demands at all, and their support has been terrible, and it's been duly noted. But they did address a lot of things in this camera, but as you just heard, it does come at a price point. I'd love to see a lot of this stuff trickle down a little bit, even if just in pieces. I don't know if it's necessarily going to take on, Nikon or Canon, but for $4,500, you are undercutting what the Canon 1DX2, the Nikon D5 are doing for $6,000 and $6,500. So let's learn a little bit about it. You'll see some of the stuff here, but it has a new stacked 24 megapixel sensor. And what they really are stressing about this camera is two things. It's basically speed and how it can be silent, which is a bit weird. I'll tackle that in a second. But as you see, it looks like an A9. They thought it was going to have a different build body, but with the new sensor and everything, they essentially use the same ergonomics of the A7 bodies, not the A9. And this is what the A9 is. So interesting point right here. It's going to have a blackout-free shooting experience as you're taking photos, which is a huge deal. So that way, when you're taking a photo, you can see what's going on. You're not limited with how that's going. Like I said, 20 frames per second is what they're going for speed-wise, but the other big thing that they are looking into is dual SD card, which one of the slots is a UHS-2 slot, so that is a huge deal. It's going to have a joystick on the back as well, so if we go to what it's going to be, this is essentially a lot of what you're seeing with the dual SD card slots, the joystick operation. The thing that it doesn't have is the articulating screen going to the side or anything like that, so you'll have to keep that in mind. I know people would want that, but whoever is buying this camera anyway for $4,500 US, doesn't need that. They still need to put that in a consumer model. But the dual SD cards, thumbs up for that. The other interesting thing they're doing is they added an Ethernet or LAN terminal, so that way you can, quickly transport files. That way you could tether easier, which I think is a big deal. The other thing, going back to the EVF, which is improved, it's brighter, is that it can kind of match how you're shooting. You can set it so that it can do 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second to really keep up with essentially everything that you're doing. And it essentially, they said, kind of has a really big buffer, and it does. It has, it's going to be able to do 241 14-bit RAW files at one time and 362 JPEG. So at 20 frames per second, you're going to crank out a ton of these things, and that's just something to know. 693 autofocusing points, phase detect, which is one of the most popular because it's the most, even though I guess it's not the most accurate, it's definitely one of the most fast things. And under Canon's dual pixel autofocusing system, Sony has some of the best focusing there, and especially in continuous shooting in sports, which this is a prime thing for this to have. The other thing you see right here on the screen is 5-axis in-body stabilization, which essentially gives you 5 stops to be able to do it. Yaw, pitch, roll, and everything like that. So having that built in is also a killer feature for something. The other big thing is the battery life. Now, they stressed that they were listening to their consumer and that the battery life is going to be improved, and it's a newer Z-type battery that's going to give you 2.2 times the capacity of what you got before, which was highly needed. The other thing they kind of glossed over real quick, and they didn't cover a ton, was that it's going to have a grip, which will allow you to have 2 batteries inside at the time. So that's a really promising thing that needed to happen. So we'll see what they are. Hopefully this alleviates some of the battery issues. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get my hands on with this. I most certainly am not going to be purchasing it, but it would be interesting to see what this actually does. The big things they kept saying is you can have essentially a silent shooting camera up to 1/32,000th of a second shutter speed, which is actually, it's a big deal, but a lot of these mirrorless cameras don't make much sound anyway. So while I think that that's awesome, the vibration free and everything helps eliminate some of the shake and distortion, I don't know if it's necessarily as big of a feature, because a lot of that can also come down to the lenses being used, and if they're loud and if they're squeaky, then it kind of defeats the purpose. But that's what they're stressing on the silent level. The other big thing that they really talked about was their pro support and how they're expanding it. And as you see, that's what they're doing. And what they're also doing is having more. Now they essentially said now they're going to add more to Canada. They're opening up a shop in New York City and everything. So I think that that's a better thing, but I'll believe that when I hear more positive reviews on something like that. Really, to kind of wrap this up, you want to hear about the ISO 100 to 51,200. I thought that was going to be a little bit bigger at 24 megapixels, but once again, you're not using those higher ISOs anyway. And I'm sure 12,800 will look pretty damn good, as even using the original A7 at that level for video looked pretty good if you graded it correctly. 4K video, no crop, full width. We'll still have your 35mm modes. 1080p, 120 frames per second at 100 megabits per second, which is actually a pretty damn cool thing. Like as I said, this will start shipping in June of 2017, so not too much. May 25th, you could start to see some of the earlier ones coming out. $4,500, $5,600 Canadian, and pre-orders, like I said, start this Friday, the 21st. So this will be a sports and journalistic dream. You're getting that 20 frames per second, the no blackout, the bigger buffer is a big deal. Also being able to write to 2 SD cards is a very strong feature for Sony. So there's a lot being covered there. So once again, some of the issues, the stressing of the silence thing, some of it has a good deal to it, some merit, but the other half is it can be silent anyway. A lot of your other ones in the A7 series, the A6000 series, are pretty much silent. The no tilt screen articulating to the side, to me is irrelevant for this type of camera, but we would still like to see that in your consumer models. And the other issue is that there's still no big prime lenses or a lot of big lenses for the Sony line that you want to use for these sports, but they did come out with a new lens that is going to be here, and it is the 100 to 400 millimeter G, so it's the professional 4.5 to 5.6. So that is a start in the right direction. They still need more lenses. So overall, this A9 has a lot of new things to it, 4K video, everything that a lot of the professionals might need. This isn't a consumer camera. Once again, the price point determines that. But I do see it giving Canon and Nikon a run for their money, pending what these battery life are. And the fact that it's no blackout, that you can really see as it is a big step for the future of Sony. So it actually looks like they kind of did care about what the consumer said. But this is going to come at a pretty penny. But if you're in this market, you're going to be able to afford it. The next best thing to come are more lenses for something like this. Still waiting to see what they're going to do, the consumer side of things, and introducing these things. But the dual SD card slot, the new batteries are really big steps, and the joystick control is a big deal that I think we're going to see in the consumer side of things, probably in Q3 or 4 of 2017. Let me know your thoughts. Does any of this interest you about the Sony A9? Let me know down in the comments below. Is this promising for the future? Is it not? Let me know. April 19th, 2017, I think is a big deal for Sony. Just need to see what's going to happen on the consumer side of things.